All right, we are now live, and I'm so happy that you have joined me. My name is Leela Viss, and I'm a blogger at 88pianokeys.me. I have a fascination and passion about apps, especially for the iPad or iOS devices, and there's a number of apps that I don't think I could live without as a teacher, and they happen to be 3 of them that are developed by the same developer. And I am privileged and honored to be interviewing that developer today. His name is Luke Bartolomeo, and he is the developer of Flashnote Derby, my all-time favorite go-to pitch recognition app. And I'm so excited about this app because he's just recently updated it, and I can't wait for him to go through all those updates with us. And also, there's another one called Rhythm Swing, which has caught everyone by surprise because it's such a fun app and it teaches at the same time. It's one of my students' favorites. And then he's maybe going to touch a little bit on one other one called Dragon Scales, which I'm using in my studio this week with all my students. It is across the board one of the favorites for reviewing scales. But instead of me talking anymore, I'm going to hand it over to Luke, and I would like Luke, first of all, to introduce himself, tell us a little bit about himself. Is he a piano teacher? Where does he live? Why did he start developing apps? And then he's going to go right into Rhythm Swing. So take it away, Luke. All right.
Thank you so much, Leela. Thanks for inviting me onto the podcast. It's a real treat for me. So I'm broadcasting today from the Sherwood Community Music School, downtown Chicago. I've been on the teaching staff there for about 8 years now. So I'm very much in the trenches, like many of you are, on a daily basis, working with students. I do have a bit of a computer science background that I just kind of acquired as I was growing up. Didn't really go to school for it or anything, but I've always kind of, in the back of my mind, wanted to use technology with my students in all sorts of interesting and productive ways. And when I couldn't find exactly the tools that would work in a certain situation, then I would set about kind of doing it myself. So that led me to the first app, which was Flashnote Derby, and I think it just celebrated its 5-year anniversary, I think this past summer. That was the first app that got me going. But yeah, so I'd be happy to walk through some of these apps with you, show you some of the features, show you maybe if you use these apps, some of the things you don't know, some of the little tricks and things, and then I can answer some questions from you. That will be great. So we'll start with Rhythm Swing, if that would be okay, and I'm going to switch my screen over here to my phone. Let's cross our fingers. There we go. Hopefully that's good on your end.
Yes, I see your screen.
Let me get it back there where we're at. Okay, so this is Rhythm Swing. This is an app that was released into the App Store, I believe it was a year ago, this past December or November, right around there. And it's divided into a few different sections here for what kind of notes you want to drill. At its present state, it's really best for working with beginners to beginning intermediate students. I don't have anything beyond 8th notes. So no 16th notes, 16th rests, triplets are not there yet, but those are all planned to be added to the future. So right now we've got these 3 basic categories that we can work with. So I'll just pick one. Let's see, we'll go with the whole note, which will include rhythms. It's not going to be obviously just all whole notes, but it would include whole notes and notes that had been covered previously in earlier lessons. So for each note type that you would choose to practice, you have these 3 options. The Learn option at the bottom will take you through a short interactive video tutorial. This wouldn't be something you would want to do in the lesson, but something the student can do at home, where it would kind of explain the note and how you recognize it, how many beats, and then also allow the student to have some simple exercises actually within that video. It's kind of nice. They're not just watching a video the whole time, but they get to practice along the way. Then I'm going to jump here to practice mode, which if I use this in the lesson, this is typically the mode that I would use most often. So this just allows them, not in a game format, but just focusing on the nitty-gritty of tapping the rhythms correctly. So it's presented me with a rhythm. It's going to give me as much time as I need to look at it. Once I tap on let's go, it's going to count it off for me. And I'm just going to tap the rhythm on my screen, wherever, anywhere on the screen. A lot of students like to follow right along with the notes as they tap, but you can really tap anywhere on the screen. So let me hit let's go, and I'll see if I can navigate through this first rhythm here. 1, 2, ready, play. So I'm really a lot better at rhythm than that.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the taps I was doing on my device were not being picked up.
Funny.
That's very peculiar. That has to do something with the broadcasting, I think, that we're doing. So we'll just assume that I'm a very early beginner here, and I'm having a lot of problems with rhythm. So can I tap these? Okay, yeah. So I don't know why that tapping wasn't working. It will give me a little feedback. I was too late playing each of these notes. It could also be that there's a little lag. Let me try it one more time. I'm going to hit try again.
Okay.
That could have been it. Let's try that one more time. 1, 2, ready, play. Much better that time. So I have to know, I have to look at my phone, because my phone is about a half second ahead of what I see on my computer screen and what I'm hearing too. So that makes it a little tricky. But that time I got everything right. So I could progress on to the next rhythm. As you see, let me just do one more of these to demonstrate this real quick. 1, 2, ready, play. Oops.
So, Luke.
Yes.
I think what I like about this app so much, first of all, the little paint splash when there's an error, love that. But then also there's a melody to go along with the rhythms that they're playing. It's much more satisfying with that backing track, all that. So brilliant, love that.
Thank you. I think it's really important. You know, if you're working with older students, you know, high school or college students that are really intent on just learning the rhythms, some of the fun things might not be quite as important. But with the age groups that, you know, this is really targeting, if it's not fun, they're not going to be inclined to do it. So I appreciate that feedback, and I've tried to make it, you know, as enjoyable as possible. So after you go through, you could get your feedback here. If you hit the little ear icon, some teachers don't know what that's about. It will just play the rhythm for you. So if they're really having trouble with it and they just need to hear it, you can tap the little ear up there and it would just play through for you. So I'm going to back out of this. And I think, as you might have noticed, the little note pointer that was going along, pointing to each of the notes, basically as they occurred in the rhythm. There are some settings here, for instance, if you did not want that note pointer to be on. You could turn that off, and it would just get you started then with the 1, 2, ready, go, jump to the first note, and then kind of vanish. And it would reappear if the student was having trouble to kind of say, now here's where we are in the melody, but it wouldn't be highlighting every note. And really, that's probably a better way to use it, because a real visual learner could probably just follow the note pointer and seem like they understand the rhythm just fine, and they're really just kind of pushing it whenever the pointer gets there. So most of the time, once they get the hang of it, I like to turn the note pointer off. Measure highlighting will highlight just the whole measure that you're playing. So it's a little bit less obvious than the note pointer, but still gives the student a little bit of guidance as to which measure they're in. And then this bottom one, required accuracy, is kind of very important. We can have relaxed, normal, or strict. So things like if you're playing the quarter notes very, very short, like staccato notes, is that correct or not correct? Well, if you're on strict mode, it's probably going to count that as incorrect, because you're really playing them more like eighth notes if you play them very, very short. So depending on how strict you want to be with the student and how old the student is and how accomplished they are, you can change those 3 settings. But those are the only 3 settings for Dragon Scales. It's very, very simple. And I'd like to, if I can, just maybe play through one of the games, just one of the sections maybe on the game, so you can see what that's about.
Oh, good.
So the game, oh, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay, so the game is something that I might assign the students to do. It's what they're going to want to do at home. It takes a little more time because of the cute animations and everything, but I don't typically do it too much in the lesson. But we'll just jump in here. I'm going to stick with the easy one because it's really tricky to anticipate and play this correctly. But all right, so there's our little monkey guy. He is the protagonist in the story, and of course the evil crocodile, ready for dinner there. So I have to do this correctly now.
1, 2, ready, play.
Okay. And of course, if I get all the way to the end, I get a little reward. If I lose all 3 of my lives, then the poor monkey's going to get munched.
Play.
But that won't happen until I would lose 3 times. So we'll quit this before that happens. Whoops, there we go. We don't want to.
Luke, just so you know, I've had one piano student. I was really quite disappointed because she was so concerned about the monkey's welfare that she really didn't like this game. That it frightened her.
You know.
And I was disappointed because this is such a surefire winner with most of my students. They're so engaged in this, and they come back and like, oh yeah, a half note lasts for 2 beats, and they love it. So I don't know how to assure them that the monkey is all right, but I did get that feedback from one student.
Yes, I know. It's a very a tough line to walk. And there's something about when we get to Flashnote Derby, I'll share one other story kind of that relates to that. But yeah, you know, I think of I kind of designed the apps the way my inner 10-year-old self, which is very much still there, would enjoy it and kind of have fun with it. But I am sensitive to those things. And so, you know, the munching of the monkey happens off screen. And, you know, you could maybe explain it like, oh, you know, he really doesn't. The monkey feeds him I don't know, something else to eat, a coconut or a banana or something, and the crocodile eats that instead. But I am kind of sensitive to that, so I'm always looking for feedback from teachers and parents as to how they think that.
I only had one student say that, but it was kind of too bad because it kind of ruined the app. And now she'll play it again, you know. So it's
especially with younger students. I have had that sometimes with like a little 5-year-old or something that we're just tapping some quarter notes, and they really play into the role of the monkey as they're playing the game. So so that's pretty much rhythm swing. I'm thinking if there was anything else I wanted to go over there. Each of these 3 sections here, the basic notes, basic rests, and the 8th notes, has that last little icon there with the crocodile with the helmet there. That is the boss stage. Mm-hmm. And for anyone who grew up playing video games like I did in the 80s and 90s, you know what the boss stage is. That's after you've made it through all the preliminary levels, and then it's about to get real. So the boss stage exercises are much longer, usually about 6 to 8 lines long, and it's really a challenge to make it all the way through on one of those and play the rhythms correctly. So that gives you a little extra incentive to work towards too for that.
Well, and if I have an off bench time, which I didn't explain at the front end of this video, but when I have students play this, it's interesting that you talk about using the practice mode during lessons. I probably do that more often, but what I do is I have my students do the learn mode first, which I absolutely love because I'm all about a flipped classroom approach, and that's exactly what happens with that is the app is teaching them about quarter notes. So even if I haven't necessarily mentioned it, they're already learning it through the app, and then they do the learn, then the practice, let's see, the learn, the practice, and then the play.
Practice and then the play, yeah.
Yeah, I think you're showing me on your screen.
Oops, okay, I don't know how to undo that, but that says
stop sharing your screen.
Oh, let me try this again. Yeah, I switched from the app, but is that better?
Yep, that's good.
Okay.
And so that to me is so valuable as a teacher because there's more and more teachers that are doing what I'm doing where the students are with me for 30 minutes at the bench, but then they're also completing another assignment. And so rhythm swing really fits the bill for that, especially with beginners. And rhythm is, I think, the most important part of reading
Yes, for
yeah.
sure. And it can be a real challenge. There are just some students who it doesn't come real naturally. But most of the time, it's not just like, oh, you can't just say, oh, this child doesn't have rhythm. I mean, that's such, I've heard adults come to me who've been told things like that, and it kind of makes me a little sad because I think it really is something that can be learned.
And I do as well, and that's what I appreciate about the app, because they are learning, but they're also having fun. I mean, yeah, all of a sudden I'm teaching and they'll be, I beat the boss stage, and they're so excited about it. And it makes a good feeling when they walk out the door. They're happy and they're excited. So thanks for Rhythm Swing. All right, moving on.
Okay, so let me look on my phone here and call up Flashnote Derby.
What I think is interesting is that you're using the phone, and I mostly depend upon the iPad, but these are phone and iPad based apps. So either one.
They are, and I would typically use an iPad in the lessons for sure. It's just the technology today, it's going to work out a little better with, I don't know if I have an ancient iPad, so I don't know if it would have worked out as well for the screen sharing today. So I'm using my phone today, but that's always an option. And sometimes when kids, like if they're traveling in the car or something, a phone might just be accessible, parent's phone or something. So it's nice to have that option. Okay, so let me try to jump over here to Flashnote Derby. And can you see that okay?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So Flashnote Derby, as I said earlier, is my first app. It celebrated its 5th anniversary this past summer and just got a very substantial update in the App Store. Version 3 just came out right just after the new year. So I'll just touch very briefly the Flashnote Derby and then maybe share some of the new features that the teachers who are just getting this new version are going to be experiencing. And I do sympathize that for a lot of teachers out there who have grown accustomed to version 2, if you have the auto update feature turned on your phone, it's like all of a sudden you just wake up the next day and version 3 is automatically on your phone and you're searching for things. And so I've been fielding a lot of emails to try to help out people with that. So here's my grand staff here, and I just leave it with the grand staff most of the time since what we're working with is piano students, but alto and tenor clefs are an option as well. So if you have teachers teaching more than one instrument and they need those other clefs, they are available. But we'll just stick with tenor and bass today. So each of these staves could just be scrolled in either direction. And we go down, I think it's like 5.5 ledger lines. I think that's going to cover about everything that we need. And you can just go through and choose which individual notes you would like to drill. So you might pick something like, the lines of the treble clef or the spaces in the bass clef, something like that. You can also, to select notes, you can just drag, whoops, let me try that again. You can drag a range of notes like that. If you want to make sure that you're erasing all the notes quickly, you can tap this little number sign over here. It's showing me I've got 8 notes selected. If I tap it, then hit an X, they're all gone. And that can be a good way to erase all the notes, especially because you might not see them all if some of them are hiding off screen. But so I'll just choose, we'll give a nice little array of notes there. And let's just run through one race and then we can kind of talk about some of the particulars here. So right now I've got it in answer button mode. So you see I've got the letters at the bottom. If you prefer the letters to start with C and go C, D, E, F, G, A, B, that is an option as well. Oops, got that one wrong. And you can see as I'm getting answers correct, my horse, which is the guy there, the jockey in the green shirt, kind of launches ahead there. If I miss one like that, then you can see my challenger is starting to catch up with me. And I'm coming up on the last question here. And there's my finish poll, and we can see I won that one pretty well. Hey, I got the overall high score. And a nice feature with this is that you can go through afterwards and go back and review those mistakes that I missed. So I can see whatever the mistakes that I might have made in the previous drill and get a little feedback on that. So let me open the settings here so you can see some of the new features that are available. So the settings will be at the top right, that little gear. If I tap on that, my settings will slide out, and you'll be able to see them all at one time on the iPad, but on the iPhone, you're gonna have to scroll through like this. The top setting will let you choose how many questions are in the race. We just did a 10 question, which is what I usually do. If you do all selected, it will ask all of the notes that you have chosen one time. So if you have a very long race, but you want to make sure that everything gets practiced at least once, then you might choose all selected. Walk, trot, canter, and gallop are how much time the student has to answer. So I was getting about 10 or 11 seconds, I think, per flashcard. If I go to gallop, I get 2 seconds to answer, or else my time's up and it moves on to the next one. The answer method is where you're going to find some of the new features. So we did letter buttons. There's also an option for on-screen piano, which would show a little 1 or 2 octave, depending on your device, on-screen piano. So you could, play the key on your iPad or iPhone. Piano with letters is the same thing, but it also shows letter names for each key for students who might really be beginning and still having trouble coming up with those note names really quickly on the keyboard. The listen mode is where it starts to get really interesting and fun. So listen will allow you to play the note on an acoustic piano instead of answering by tapping on your iPad or iPhone. I can't really demonstrate that super well, but there's some videos on my website that show students working on that at the same time. So basically you can put your iPad up on the music rack, start a drill, and it's going to show you the flashcard, and you play it on the piano and get feedback as to whether you're correct or not. The sensitivity setting here is very important for teachers, especially if you're in a school setting or if there's just generally some background noise. If you've got real high sensitivity, it's going to start getting some interference from the background noise. Or even if you're talking to the student while they're playing, sometimes it might suddenly mark a note wrong before they've even played. And that's because the background noise is kind of confusing it. So we could slide the sensitivity down. That will require the students to hold the note a little bit longer. So they have to hold the note longer, but it generally improves the accuracy of the app's pitch detection. And then the MIDI option down here would allow you to connect a MIDI keyboard to your device, and then you don't have any of the problems then with the background noise or any of that, obviously, but you have to have a MIDI keyboard in order to use that. Note names down here, as I said, if you prefer for the letter buttons to start with C instead of A, that can happen. Or if you want to use solfege, some teachers like to do that, you can use do, re, mi down there. So those are the settings for answer methods. Theme. So we're just finishing up reindeer race season, which allows you just some different graphics. You can race reindeer in a wintry, Christmassy setting instead of on a racetrack. And those themes, I'm planning on adding some more to those, because that does kind of keep the drill from getting a little old and stale, especially if you use it frequently. As I mentioned before, you've got your choice of clefs down here. There are instructional videos as well that you can go to here that give just a little bit of guidance on some possible ways of note reading. I know there's so many different ways teachers like to teach note reading. If they use the Every Good Boy Does Fine, or if they use guide notes, or if they have their own systems. So these are just my suggestions of some ways that you can help learn to memorize notes. There's one additional setting on iPad that's not available here. iPad, because I'm on my phone, the iPad has a setting for grand staff flashcards. And there's simply not enough room on the iPhone to display treble and bass clefs on each flashcard all the time. But if you're on an iPad, you can have students see those flashcards on a grand staff. And that's really good for piano students to start recognizing the difference between treble and bass and where those are on the piano. I'll back out of that. And I'll quickly go into presets. So if I had settings that I used frequently for students, if I wanted like a low ledger line drill like that, I could create the notes that I wanted to be in that drill and just give it a name here. And There we go. And then I can always come back to that and it will instantly just set my drill up the way I need it to be. If I tap one of these envelopes over here, the mail icons, I can send those drills home to a student. And that's a really nice thing because we can work on like the notes that they have in an upcoming song. And then I can go ahead and send them that drill at home, and they can not have to worry that they're not configured correctly, that they are practicing exactly what I need them to practice. And one other really neat new feature that we have in Flashnote Derby is the ability to set up multiple user accounts. And on my phone here, I don't have any set up, but you could add some. I'll pretend my daughter needs some work on our notes, which she definitely does. So I'll put her in there. And that way it will track the progress. And there's actually reports that you can get showing how much time the student has actually devoted to practicing notes in the app. You can see exactly which notes they are answering correctly, consistently, and which notes are giving them problems. So that's it. Really gives you now some helpful feedback that you can plan what the student needs to work on in the future.
Luke, I was playing around with that a little bit, and that is so nice. And the feedback and how you've provided how they're doing is a great setup that, you know, is very helpful for teachers, but also for students. Good information for them as well. But I was wondering, is there a way to do a bulk assignment for all the guests, or do you have to assign them one at a time?
Yeah, so that's something that is on my to-do list for sure. So right now, let's see if I go to, oops, I'm trying to click my screen again. If I go to one of these presets here, and let's see. So it gives me this dialog. I can choose from my contacts here, which is kind of nice. And it will fill in the email address for me that way.
Okay.
But it's really just one at a time right now. And that's, I knew instantly as soon as I released it and got the first feedback requesting that that's obviously something you would want to do, especially if you do any small group classes or anything like that. You want to be able to send the same drill. So be looking for that for sure coming in the near future.
Okay, good. And I was wondering, what does it look like when you send a student or email a student an assignment? They get it in their inbox, obviously, and then what?
They get it in their inbox, and let's see, can I switch back to other mode here? Hang on one second so I can actually see who I'm talking to. There we go.
Yeah.
There I am. Okay, so they would get an email. The email will actually come from homework at Flashnote Derby. So there haven't been too many problems with spam filters, but usually that goes through no problem. But then as the reply to field in the email, it has the teacher's email address. So if they need to get feedback, the email will go directly to you. And it has a link right there where they just tap on to start the drill. And it will automatically then just load Flashnote Derby. It will install that drill and give the student a little notice that they now have a new preset that's been set up for them and how they can access that. It does require that they're connected to the internet that first time when they install the drill. But after that, they don't need to be connected because it retrieves that information from a server, what the drill consisted of, but then it's all set up for them. And if they don't have Flashnote Derby yet, obviously the link is not going to do anything. They'll just tap it and get an error message. So there's also a link at the bottom of each email if they need to download Flashnote Derby, they can do that from the email as well.
And let's go there next, because that is one thing that I have not required of my students is to purchase any apps. Because I do a lot of the off-bench stuff here in the studio, I haven't done that. And you know, I still have parents saying, okay, why don't they know their notes better? And I know it is one of those things. They really have to do a daily exercise of them just to make friends with them. Now, I'm curious, what do you do with your students? Are they all required to have Flashnote Derby?
I don't require that. I don't know. I feel funny a little bit saying they have to have it, but we use it in the lesson. The parents see it a lot of times. I mean, most parents, I get the feeling, are pretty happy to find a good educational app. I mean, they'll be on board with that. The kids a lot of times are downloading, you know, all these games and everything, which is great. I do too. But I think if the parents are, find something that's fun for the kids to play, but they're also really going to get benefit out of it, and it will make a difference, then they're pretty much on board. I like to say that with Flashnote Derby in particular, I've always told parents, there's lots of challenges in learning to play a musical instrument, lots. But one of them should not be the student is having trouble learning their notes, or they haven't memorized it. Because kids can memorize. I mean, if a child is able to read or know the letters of the alphabet, they're capable of memorizing. It's not a lot of fun, and if they only work on it at the lesson for that 5 minutes or whatever you get flashcards out, that might not be enough. So there's lots of challenges in playing the piano, but recognizing that this is an E and this is an A, that's something that just about any child can master.
I like the framework that you gave it, though. There's a lot of hard things about reading music, so why not get this one out of the way?
Right.
So thank you for that. I think teachers will appreciate that. That's a good phrase to hand to our students. So just to recap, I have been promoting Flashnote Derby from day one. Whenever I speak to anyone, I always highlight this one. And I think this is still the only app in my mind that is so easy to customize exactly what I want the student to work on. And the very first drill I'll give students is middle C in the treble clef and middle C in the bass clef. And they'll say, well, Miss Leela, that's the same note. And I said, I know, but I want you to understand that it looks different in both of them. And it's a great app just for that reason alone, because it's really flashcards, but there's no paper, you don't drop anything, it's all on there. They like the race, the cheers, all that kind of stuff. So I'm a huge fan. So thank you for explaining some of those brand new features too. Those are huge. And being able to play on the acoustic piano with MIDI. Yeah,
that really does kind of change the whole usefulness of the app, because it's really, we need to know what letter the note represents, but it's really about identifying a symbol on the screen or on the page with a key and a pitch on the piano. So this kind of just makes that connection directly.
Correct. Well, thank you again for rounding those up, the rhythm swing and the Flashnote Derby. And we can't look at dragon scales, but I just want to mention that one a minute, because I'm using that one all week long with all levels of students. For some reason, that one it's age friendly regardless of what age they are. And most of the students aren't using it too much because we're not doing a lot of different scales. But it's intriguing to every age, and I like how it's customizable. And yeah, I'd love to hear what your thoughts are. And then I've got a suggestion or a request for an addition at some point. But go for it. Tell us a little bit about it.
Yeah, so Dragon Scales has been around for maybe 3 years or so. It's much more of a niche app. It's not, there's all kinds of piano teachers and students and parents. They're all, notes and rhythm. And scales, obviously, good teachers are working with their students on those as well. But it's kind of more of a niche app. So it's got very rudimentary graphics. I'm almost embarrassed in some cases, but it's kind of charming too. I mean, the animation is very, stilted and not professional at all, but it's still cute. And it's at this point you can, it'll ask you whatever scales that you want to drill. You can configure it, for exactly what keys you need. It does harmonic, melodic, and natural minors. And you play the scale just using a pointer finger on the on-screen keyboard. But, it's really good for learning the patterns of the black keys and white keys in any particular scale. It's actually, in some cases, a little more difficult to play. If you practice the scale a lot with the correct fingering, it can be almost a challenge to just play it with one finger. I'll have my students sometimes just do that on the piano keyboard, because with the fingering kind of reminds you where the sharps and the flats are, but you just think of it with one finger. It's almost more of a challenge in some case. So I'd like to bring that same pitch recognition technology that we have in Flashnote Derby in some way to Dragon Scales, so that it could be more of a play along type thing where you're actually playing on the piano the scale. So you'd have the option of doing it either way.
Well, of course, I have a whole bunch of things that would be great to add, because I'm now working on key signatures and scales and having students think through the circle of keys. I'm doing kind of a mix of all of them, but one of them being, and I don't know if you could hook this in, but just something to think about. I love the idea of being able to play on an acoustic piano, and the piano being able to give feedback, or the app giving feedback. But another challenge is for students to write out the scale on a staff. And putting the sharps in the correct place and all of that, not even with the key signatures, but I'm just prepping students for tests, and a lot of times they have to write out the scale and have to know where to put the sharps or the flats, which way the stems go, you know, those kind of things. So maybe in version 3 or 4, or whatever, you could add that.
Yeah, that's a great idea. So let me just say a couple things about that. One is I'm so always looking for that kind of feedback, because you know, I think of how I use the apps with students, but you know, I need to know exactly what the kind of features are that other teachers would find beneficial. So, you know, thank you for that. And anyone else who might be listening and watching, you know, send me an email, please, if you have a great, you know, killer feature that would really help you and would be good for your students, because you know, I'm happy to do that. Sometimes it's just I haven't thought of these things, or I haven't, you know, thought that this would be useful for someone else. So I do appreciate that.
Yeah, and I don't have a corner on the market on all apps and what they all feature, but I don't think there's very many apps that encourage scale construction. So I think Dragon Scales is one of the ones that I know that I recommend to people for that. Yeah. So now knowing that, maybe that will motivate you to
get back to work.
Yeah, get back to work on that one. And it works fine the way it is, but you know, there's a need for it, I think.
Yeah, there's lots of room for adding things to Dragon Scales. It was kind of something that I use similarly for test preparation. My students do a lot of the Royal Conservatory music exams, and it actually has presets that you can, you know, if you're doing a level 7 exam or level 6 exam, you can just hit a button and it will choose the scales that you need to know. If anyone else is doing other, you know, like guild auditions or other things that have like a syllabus of scales and they'd like to see that included in Dragon Scales, I'd be happy to add that in. But that's why I created the app basically, and then I just kind of have left it alone for a little while. But it might be time to get back to it and give it a little refresh.
Well, there's no rest for you, Luke. You must continue.
must go on.
All right. Well, thank you so much for that overview of all of them, and thank you for joining me. And like I said, I promote your 3 apps a good deal, just because I can tell that you're a teacher yourself, and so you see what students need to review and have reinforcement, and the continual feedback that you're giving students, that's so helpful, especially in Flashnote Derby. The idea of telling them which ones they got wrong, that's huge. You know, that's going to really help them in the long run. So any closing remarks you have that you?
Not really, just because I've got my first student of the day is going to be here in about 15 minutes. I'm glad. Sometimes he's early and he would have just barged right in and been like, "What are you doing, Mr. B? What's going on here?" So I think we made it through without that interruption, but I've got to get back to it and see my wonderful kids I've got coming. But if anyone would like to contact me, probably the best email you could reach me at is support@flashnotederby.com.
Very good. And I'll have some notes
go
along with this as well, so that people know that. But thank you for your availability and for your continual, well, you got to know a lot about app developing, and obviously you're creative and you're a teacher. So your students are lucky to have you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the kind words and the chance to be here today.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.